Hi there. Have you ever witnessed or been involved in accidents on campus? Do you think most of them could have been prevented or avoided if everyone on campus were to be more mindful? Let's see how we can all make safety and health on campus our collective responsibility.
Let's learn about identifying unsafe conditions and what we can do to prevent unsafe acts that may cause accidents. The learning objectives for this section are as shown. Is this a familiar scene on your campus? Can you identify the accidents that are just waiting to happen to Bob? We can say that Bob is working under unsafe conditions. An unsafe condition is a condition or hazard in our environment that may pose a danger to individuals or cause damage to property. To keep yourself safe, it is crucial that you learn how to identify unsafe conditions around campus. Let's look at common examples of unsafe conditions that plague campus life. Untidy and cluttered workspaces, including your classrooms and labs, pose hazards. For instance, you may trip over loose cables or wires on the floor, or knock into chairs or bags placed untidily around the room. In the lab, you may cut yourself on sharp tools or equipment left lying around carelessly. Working in an untidy and cluttered space also poses fire-related hazards. Another unsafe condition is the presence of wet, dirty or uneven surfaces. You may slip and fall on wet floors, or trip over cracks on surfaces when playing sports. Unsafe conditions could also be due to the natural environment, such as rain and lighting conditions. You can see that we are exposed to various unsafe conditions on campus every day. Accidents are likely to happen if we persist on acting unsafely despite knowing the dangers. Next, let's see how we can apply the look, think, do approach when we come across some unsafe acts. Now that you know how to identify unsafe conditions around you while in campus. First, you should realize that many accidents happen when people engage in unsafe acts despite being aware of the dangers around them. An unsafe act is an action that will pose danger to ourselves or others. So, before we take action in any situation, we should make it a habit to apply the look, think, do approach first to ensure we do not act unsafely. Let's see how this approach can help prevent potential accidents in these 4 scenarios. Before climbing the ladder, John should think about the potential dangers of using it. For example, he may fall from height. He should think of the consequences of falling off and the severity of his injuries, and implement controls to prevent himself from falling off while climbing. In this second example, before Kevin starts playing basketball, he should look out for possible dangers. In this case, the surface condition of the court and the possibility of lightning. He should think of the consequences of playing outdoors in a rain. He can decide on a safer alternative action. In the third example, when working with machinery, Clara must look out for the moving and rotating parts of the drill which could be dangerous. She should also consider how the chips, dust and noise from the drilling process can harm her. She has to think of the consequences if she fails to handle the machine properly or protect herself adequately. Clara should then implement controls that will ensure her safety. In this last example, while doing housekeeping, Ben should look out for potential fire hazards. He should think of the consequences of having fire hazards, and eliminate the potential harm by finding a safer place to stack the boxes. Now that you've seen a few examples of how to apply the look, think, do approach, would you know how to apply the approach to prevent potential accidents from happening in these situations too? To keep yourself safe on campus, you just have to bear a few pointers in mind. Observe safety rules displayed at prominent locations around campus. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment during workshops or lab sessions. Try to develop a safety-first culture on campus. To influence your peers on the importance of not carrying out unsafe acts that may result in injury to others. And lastly, stop any unsafe acts you observe on campus and make a report to the staff in charge. Do note that anyone committing an unsafe act may be penalized. Applying the look, think, do approach requires you to actively look out for hazards and assess the risks involved in any situation you encounter. In a nutshell, think before you act. The most common hazards are slip, trip and fall. Hazards related to fire safety. Sports or CCA-related hazards. Traffic-related hazards. Mechanical hazards involving tools and machinery. Electrical hazards. Ergonomic hazards, and psychosocial hazards. Let's see how to apply the look, think, do approach to prevent accidents that may result from each of these hazards. Steve has to rush from the LT to the sports club for his CCA, which starts in 15 minutes. Let's apply the look think do approach in this situation to help Steve complete his task safely. First, Steve should look out carefully for potential hazards along his route from the LT to the sports club that may cause him to slip, trip or fall. He should think about consequences of rushing and the severity. Then he can decide on the actions he can take to ensure he arrives at the sports club safely. Steve helps out at the sports club office a few times a week. Look at the state of the office. What can Steve do to prevent himself from having accidents while working here? First, he should look for potential fire hazards that are likely to compromise safety. The main danger is the clutter lying around the electrical board, which could cause a fire or prevent access to firefighting in an emergency. He can also look out for other fire hazards, as shown here. Steve should think about the consequences of these fire hazards and how he can protect himself from these. For example, can he trip over the obstacles? In the event of a fire, can the combustibles act as a fuel source? Finally, Steve should take the necessary actions to eliminate or reduce the risk of fire hazards. Here are some good fire safety practices he can adopt. Jane is taking up kayaking for the first time. How can she prevent herself from having an accident while participating in the sport? Well, she should first look out for potential dangers, for example, the depth of the water, the weather, or her own inexperience. Jane should think about the consequences and how to safeguard herself from the dangers. For example, is she a good enough swimmer? What if it starts raining? How should she prepare the equipment? Based on her risk assessment, she can now take the necessary actions to prevent having accidents while rowing. To enjoy sports and minimize the risk of injuries, we can adopt these sports safety practices. Marie is in a hurry to get to her early morning lecture, starting in 5 minutes. She first has to cross a busy road to get to the LT. Before crossing, she should look out for potential dangers such as oncoming or speeding vehicles. She should also be aware of large vehicles or signs that obstruct her view of the road or other vehicles behind them. On campus, traffic hazards are increasingly caused by the use of personal mobility devices and handphones while walking. She has to think about the consequences of dashing across the road, mainly what her chances are of getting hit by a car. Finally, Marie can take some actions to reduce her risk of meeting an accident. On campus, you can also safeguard yourself from traffic hazards by adopting these road safety practices. Sahemi is about to use an electric drill to make holes in a piece of wood. How can he prevent an accident while using this tool? Sahemi is exposing himself to mechanical hazards when using any machinery or tool. First, he should look out for the rotating parts of the electric drill which may pose a danger to his fingers. Here are other examples of mechanical hazards caused by the moving parts from different types of machines. Sahemi should think through the possible consequences of not handling the drill properly and how severe his injuries can be. Finally, Sahemi can take the necessary actions to complete his task safely. Before he starts the drill, he could prepare a mental checklist of the precautions he should take. The electrician did not do a good job laying out electrical cables in Kevin's office. How can Kevin protect himself and his colleagues from having accidents while at work? Firstly, Kevin should look out for potential dangers that may cause an accidental electrocution. He should also look out for other electrical hazards as described here. Kevin should think about the consequences of these electrical hazards. We all know that electricity, when not handled properly, can cause electrocution or fire that may result in the loss of life or property damage. Knowing the serious consequences, Kevin should take appropriate actions to reduce the risk of accidents from the electrical hazards. Likewise, you should also be aware of these basic electrical safety requirements and practices. Diana has been studying at her desk all day in this position. That evening, she complained of lower back pain and stiff neck. Her eyes were also tearing from looking at her laptop for hours. How can Diana prevent getting these conditions while studying? To prevent this condition, Diana should look out for potential ergonomic hazards such as these. Diana should think about the consequences of remaining in the same sitting position for too long. If she continues with a bad sitting posture, Diana is at risk of sustaining an injury or developing musculoskeletal disorders, or MSD. MSD affects the muscles, bones and joints, and can occur in many parts of the body. Its common causes are as shown here. Finally, Diana should prevent injury or reduce the risk of developing musculoskeletal disorders by adopting some good study practices. Firstly, She should improve her sitting posture, taking into consideration the proper position of the computer screen, the correct position and height of her chair, and the correct placement of her feet on the ground. She should also take regular study breaks. Roy constantly avoids a group of course mates who have repeatedly threatened to beat him up if he refuses to share the answers of his assignments with them. Roy becomes increasingly depressed and withdrawn. He stopped hanging out with his friends. Are you aware that bullying is an example of a psychosocial hazard? What can Roy's friends do to help him? In this case, they should look out for signs that Roy is going through a difficult time and needs help, for example, abnormal behaviors, depression, violence, or stress. Roy's friends should also think about the consequences to Roy if the bullying is prolonged. If Roy is unable to cope with the bullying, it will likely lead to poor mental well-being. Finally, Roy's friends should take action to stop the bullying and advise Roy to seek help and talk to someone, such as a campus counselor, or call the SOS helpline. The well-being of each and every student is important. Seek help whenever you need it. There are various forms of support in place to enhance your physical, emotional, intellectual and social development. Also, do extend a helping hand to your friends if you observe any signs of depression in them. There are student counselors whom you can always go to for help. In this last section, let's learn about reporting incidents, near misses and accidents. Here are the learning objectives for this section. We have seen many examples of things that can go wrong when you are on campus. Some incidents are more serious than others and can result in injuries. Let's learn a few important definitions before we proceed. While on campus, Jimmy witnessed these incidents within the same day. He only reported the car accident as the victim sustained injuries, while the other incident was just a near miss. Do you think Jimmy did the right thing? Well, Jimmy should have reported both the accident and the near miss incident. Jimmy must report the accident and near miss to help identify their root causes. Many times, the root causes boil down to having unsafe conditions or people engaging in unsafe acts. Knowing the root causes will help the school's management to take action to prevent or reduce recurrence of these reported incidents. In this example, the school can take the necessary actions to reduce traffic accidents, as well as prevent further incidents of falling tree branches. We also wanted to create a safe learning environment within campus and prevent people from getting hurt from similar incidents. And it is important to ensure that people comply with legal requirements. So, how can Jimmy make an incident report? He should make a report as soon as possible, so that corrections and corrective actions can be taken. He should report according to his institution's own reporting procedures. He should try to attach evidences, such as photographs or documents.
Great job! We have come to the end of this course. Do remember these important concepts we have covered and play your part in campus safety and health.